So we're away at MeetBSD this week, but we still have a great show for you. We're going to be joined by Pawel, who's done a lot of things in FreeBSD over the years, including the initial ZFS port. That's kind of a big thing. So we're going to hear about how that came out, what he's up to now, and a whole lot more. So you're going to want to stay tuned, and we will be back next week with a normal episode of BSD Now, which is your place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 62, A Gift from the Sun, recorded October 29th, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us. We're actually here before you're watching this. So we're recording this at the same time as last week's episode because we're going to be on our way back from MeetBSD. Probably about right now. We're both flying back.
We're both in the air, not reachable.
Yes. But of course, we want to have a good episode for you guys this week. And boy, do we have one. We got Pawel, who's going to be talking about his work he did to port a ZFS to FreeBSD, Geom, Jelly, Capsicum, various topics, which this is an exciting interview. You'll want to take a look at this.
Yeah, it's not just, having ZFS ported to FreeBSD was a huge deal. Oh, yeah. But also just as he tells the story about how it actually happened, it really gives you insight into how developing actually gets done.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that would have been a whole interview there, but then we got Geom, Jelly, Capsicum, and all this other stuff as bonus. And I love it. Before we did the interview, he's like, I don't know what to talk about.
It's like, my English is not so good. It's like, your English is fine.
Yeah, this will be fantastic. Yeah. So, definitely one of the better interviews we recorded at EuroBSDCon. So,
considering, we did it in the hallway, kind of impromptu.
It worked. It worked great. But, you guys will definitely enjoy this. But before we get into that, of course, we got to mention one of the sponsors this week, which again is IX Systems. And the URL for that is ixsystems.com/BSDNow. And we're actually returning from one of IX's conferences they just put on, MeetBSD, which runs every 2 years out in Silicon Valley, where we'll be at the Western Digital headquarters, I guess. So, hopefully that has been fun. We will fill you in with all sorts of details about that. I'm sure IX will have stuff for future weeks where we can talk about what happened out there.
Yes. We'll be sharing stories from that for a while, I think.
Yes, but, I'm sure we will.
First, it's like we talk about IX going to all these Linux conferences and stuff and make sure to show the BSD flag. But in this case, they're actually running their own conference. And it's actually a hybrid unconference, so it gives you it's quite different and much more social.
We'll explain a little bit of that when we get back.
It'll be much easier to explain with examples of how awesome it was.
That's right.
And the other thing is that it really goes to show how tight their partnerships are with their upstream vendors and stuff, because the conference is sponsored by Intel and Western Digital, and Western Digital is like, you can use our office to have your conference. That's how big of a partner IX is with Western Digital. And, having someone that's that integrated as your vendor helps a lot, because, if you have a problem with, if you need custom firmware to make your drives work better for your specific workload, that can happen, because IX isn't just some person Western Digital has never heard of. They are the guys that come over to our office and have parties.
Yeah, they have a relationship with these other companies.
Exactly.
That stuff happens and can get done. And of course, the sales guys speak that language, and so do the developers and the engineers. So definitely a company powered by a lot of expertise in all things open source. Not just BSD, they do Linux as well and stuff. But definitely you want to consider them if you guys are looking for anything from big to small. A little FreeNAS Mini up to the 80 core powerhouses we've seen them build and shown on previous episodes. So. Again, that URL, ixsystems.com/BSDNow. Let them know we sent you, and we would appreciate that. And next up, sit down, lean back, get your headphones on a little tighter, and enjoy the awesome interview we had with Pawel talking about ZFS, the porting of that to FreeBSD, among other things.
So this week we're joined by Pawel Dawidek from FreeBSD project. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Great. So first question we ask pretty much everybody. So what's your backstory? How did you first get into BSD?
Okay, so I started I started with computers when I was 12 years old, but then I was using C64 and Amiga for a long time. Mm-hmm. And when I go to study, actually I discovered, first I think I was using Debian for maybe a few months at most. And then a friend of mine showed me FreeBSD. Mm-hmm. And basically I switched almost directly from Amiga to FreeBSD. So that was one of my problems, that I didn't really have any Windows experience in mm-hmm. my life. So,
is that a problem?
It is a bit of a problem when it comes to family and friends, because
sure.
if you are in IT, they assume that you must know this stuff. So yeah. You must know how to install antivirus and stuff like that.
That means you don't get phone calls in the middle of the night. My Windows PC broke again.
Yes, but I still got that had those questions mm-hmm. asked. But yes, that was my story, and of course I loved FreeBSD from maybe not from the day one, because it took me a few attempts before I successfully installed FreeBSD mm-hmm. for the first time, but since then it was great adventure, let's say.
So what are you working on currently with FreeBSD?
I'm not that active anymore, but I still do some stuff mostly with Capsicum, mostly security projects. This is my main interest.
So the other question we can ask is what are some of the things that are currently in FreeBSD that we can blame you for?
Yes, probably quite a few of them over the years. Actually, I've been a FreeBSD committer for 10 years now. Wow. I mostly worked on storage and security, but my code is in many different places as well. But in storage, I was working on the various geom improvements and geom classes like gmirror, gstripe, gconcat, and a few other geom classes like jelly. And also one of the projects I had the most fun with was porting ZFS to FreeBSD. Of course, it was well, very interesting experience.
Well, since you brought that up, so what was your interest in porting ZFS? What kind of brought that on initially?
Yes, I remember this. The exact moment a friend told me on holidays about ZFS. He was working on a huge telecom in Poland, and they used Solaris a lot. Mm-hmm. And he told me about the info about file system Sunny was working on. Mm-hmm. And he told me about all those features, like you can have many data sets, you have end-to-end checksumming, encryption, compression back then, volume manager integrated, mm-hmm. and it just sounded great. And I was hoping that somebody will finally, when the file system will be created, I was hoping that somebody will port it to FreeBSD. But of course, in FreeBSD, I think it was a curse mm-hmm. with file systems. We had UFS, and we had a lot of failed attempts to port other file systems to FreeBSD. I know there was HFS port from macOS 10, there was RiserFS, but read-only. We have XFS, which was also read-only.
So DFS, that was read-only.
Yes, many of them.
Mm-hmm.
Not finished, and it was really starting to be a problem. So then UFS 2 came, which improved things a bit, but of course something like ZFS would be much nicer.
Sure.
Basically, it was. I wanted to see how hard would it be to port ZFS. So I started some work thinking that maybe in a few months, if I won't get bored, I will have some initial port. But the project for me was such fun to work on. I got so passionate that basically first 10 days and 10 nights I was mostly coding non-stop. And it was such a great fun. I get so much adrenaline that I could actually continue. And truly, I was sleeping for like 2 hours a day or something like
wow.
that. And after 10 days, I did have read-write working prototype. So
that's impressive.
yes,
Yeah, wow.
it was
Fastest
a bit
file
surprising.
system port ever.
Yes, but of course it wasn't all roses. It took many months, many more months to actually make ZFS get into a committable shape and put it into FreeBSD. But it was great fun, definitely.
So what were some of the big hurdles that you had to overcome to get ZFS into FreeBSD and get it all working?
I think, well, ZFS was nicely implemented. The code base was very clean, and very helpful was the fact that most of the code could compile in userland. So the code was prepared to be able to compile in the kernel and in userland, which means that there was a lot of work put on Sangai's side to make the code portable. So I had to create this very ugly layer, compatibility layer with Solaris, which I'm not proud of, but it allowed me in the past to keep the changes to the minimum, the difference between us and upstream, which was extremely helpful porting new versions, because of course I ported very early version of ZFS, and it was very dynamically developed at Sun, so there were massive changes, and this layer helped us to move forward fairly quickly. But I think that was the biggest problem. Of course, ZFS is file system, and it touches our VFS layer. You have to integrate with VFS layer, which I find, I think, the most complex piece of our kernel code. So there are so many magic in there and secret knowledge that it's really hard to. Now I know how why all those file system ports failed before, because basically dealing with VFS is tough.
I spent a week, a couple months ago, looking at Fuse and the VFS layer there, and that was just so yeah. Don't
especially our VFS, because I'm fan of simplifying VFS, because our VFS is trying to help file system developers by doing a lot of work for them, like synchronization and buffering and stuff like that, which in theory is nice, but when you deal with more complex file system, you do want to have more stuff moved to file system itself. So
right, you want to have more control and let the file system. ZFS has its own strategy for buffering. It's different.
Exactly, and also stuff like range locking in files. VFS doesn't know about that, and so ZFS can be much more efficient when it comes to performance, when it has more control over the whole process.
Were there any other interesting things that came up that making Solaris code work on FreeBSD?
No, there were some differences between how we do stuff, but surprisingly, the kernel's APIs were pretty similar. I think there is much less difference between FreeBSD and Solaris kernel than it was between FreeBSD and Linux kernel, for example. So that was helpful.
Makes sense. So this question's from our producer, and he's asking, what would it finally take to get native ZFS encryption?
So to be honest, I'm not a fan of how ZFS encryption is implemented in Oracle version.
I don't think anybody is.
Yeah.
Well, some people are. The idea behind Oracle encryption is that you encrypt individual data sets, which has a lot of shortcomings, and I don't think it really matches our times, because these days, where do you want to use encryption? Mostly on your laptops, because you take laptops with you. less so on servers, because where do you store keys? If your server have to start automatically after outage or power failure. So mostly laptops. And how many users are on laptops? Mostly one.
Sure.
So Oracle ZFS encryptions assumes that there are multiple users, and they want to optimize this part. So every single data set can be encrypted with user key, which is a problematic on many levels. First of all, it is totally incompatible with the duplication, because if you have different data sets using different keys, you have different data stored in the pool, so you cannot deduplicate. The only way to deduplicate is to use clones, is to clone file systems, so the key is also cloned, which is not very nice.
If the data is for separate users, it's not going to make sense to clone.
It's not coherent.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not fan of this idea. I don't think it's really the way to go. The way I would implement ZFS encryption is to actually use ZFS encryption below datasets level. So if we could encrypt VDEVs, not the file systems. So that would be my idea, to encrypt row tracks. This way we can also encrypt more data, because of course with Oracle ZFS encryption we cannot encrypt ZIP-wide metadata, for example.
So you have the next one.
Could you tell us a bit about the GOM and Jelly stuff and what you've done with that?
Yes, so Jelly is basically disk encryption. It resides below file systems. There are many similar projects like that. There is one that now is available in macOS 10, 5.02, which works this way on block level. There was TrueCrypt for a long time. Of course, Linux has his own implementation. Jelly is a long-running project. We did have disk encryption in ZFS when I started to work on Jelly, but it didn't really fit my needs. So I started to work on my own disk encryption Geom class, which does provide some unique features. For example, I don't know of any disk encryption software that provides data authentication. You can actually verify data integrity within this software, which of course you do pay a price of using additional storage, so it doesn't really fit everyone's needs, but it's pretty unique. And Jelly was also, from the day one, it was integrated with our Open Crypto framework. So this is in-kernel encryption framework. So you could use script accelerators. Now you can use RSNI, which is extremely fast. And Jelly also provides many useful features, like you can use multiple secrets to decrypt your disk partition or whatever. So you can have like a passphrase and a key stored on a pen drive or in a file, stuff like that. So you can also have multiple keys. You can imagine a scenario where in a company your security officer has a different key to your master key, and you have your own key. So if your employee lost key, the data is not lost. The security officer has his own key, different one, but
we'll be able to decrypt that data.
Exactly. Yes.
That's very helpful.
Definitely. So, are you actively involved still in the Geom or any file system development?
Currently, I'm mostly moved to security stuff.
Okay.
I do like to observe ZFS development these days. I'm very happy that there are more and more companies and people involved in ZFS development on FreeBSD, because for few years, I think, I was the only person who was porting ZFS to FreeBSD, and it was definitely not one-person project. So I was waiting for a long time for others to join, and this happened, and there are quite a lot of companies actually using ZFS in production or for their products. So many people are involved in ZFS development on FreeBSD. We have very good relations with Illumos community, with Matt Ahrens, who is leading the community. He is now also FreeBSD committer. So that's all great.
Yeah, and just the other week we were interviewing the company Voxer, and they switched to FreeBSD because on top of getting ZFS and dtrace, our ZFS has the trim support for their SSDs, and Illumos doesn't actually have that.
Yes, trim support was one of the developments we did in FreeBSD. I did it initially for multiplay from UK, and this is something that only FreeBSD has, as far as I know. Yes, there are many stories like that companies were switching from Linux to FreeBSD to get ZFS, so that's very nice.
Yeah, that's very cool. And that's the common thing we hear from.
And also companies who switch from Solaris to FreeBSD, also because of the Oracle acquisition.
Yeah, and just they found that better documentation, more active community, the mailing list. If you ask a question, you will probably actually get an answer instead of.
I'm sure many of them were not sure at first, but after they switch, I heard many positive stories. So definitely.
So you could tell us about your work on Capsicum and what you're doing with that now?
So mostly Capsicum, the kernel part of Capsicum is more or less in a shape that it's very usable. The thing we still work on is Casper daemon. It's a daemon that helps to use Capsicum, because Capsicum provides very tight sandboxing. You have no access to global namespaces. This is actually great technology. I really recommend reading more about it, because it's really capabilities, ideology, and Capsicum, the implementation of this ideology in Unix systems is actually really great idea, and actually security framework done right. In the past I was working on my own security stuff for to monitor system calls and stuff like that, and it was just bad idea. And Capsicum is the way to go, and it gets much more traction. There is a Linux port sponsored by Google. I know that OpenBSD is looking at Capsicum and does like the design, so I hope that Capsicum would be more and more, more and more useful, and application developers will start to treat Capsicum as the way to do sandboxing and to protect their applications. And Casper daemon is a way to help to develop those applications, because of course in such conditions that you have no access to global namespaces, you still need some functionality. And Casper daemon, for example, once you are in Capsicum sandbox, you won't be able to even resolve hostname to IP address. And Casper is there to help you to do that. So you can connect to Casper and you treat every Casper connection, every access to every Casper service as a capability. So it's still within this whole capability ideology, so it works very nicely. Although we are switching, we experimented with Casper as a separate daemon, and it proved to be not the best idea, because Casper is running as its own daemon, so it has totally different context, and it's hard to do some of the stuff. For example, if your process have something like resource limiting, or chooses some CPU set or routing table, Casper doesn't know about that. We could try to forward all this info, but there is also no way to securely forward this. You can use Unix domain sockets to obtain UID of the process, for example, but you cannot obtain which routing table it's using. So we could extend the Unix domain socket to provide this info, but that's definitely not the way to go. We need to make Casper more integrated into the process, so it spawns from the main process and inherits all the limitations and all the configurations.
Yeah, so that it doesn't actually provide the user a way around resource limits or around the routing table they've been restricted to at the CPU set or whatever.
Exactly. So there is some work to do on that front as well.
Nice. So what exactly is your day job, and do you guys use FreeBSD there?
Oh yes, we do a lot. So over the years, I'm running my own company, Wheel Systems. We are a security vendor. We provide security products, and over the years, I was developing all those technologies like Jelly, porting ZFS, developing Capsicum, and it turns out it all fits greatly to our latest product, which basically allows you to monitor remote sessions. So you can store. We can put our FUDO, which is the name of the box, in the middle between client and the server, and store all the traffic like SSH, RDP, and then replay the traffic on your web browser. And of course, it deals with very sensitive data. So we implement all those technologies in the box to actually make it very secure for customers to use. So we use Jelly encryptions for all the storage we have. We use ZFS. Also to replicate between the cluster nodes, but also it provides us compression, snapshots, all those features. And of course we heavily use Capsicum because compromising this box is not an option. So we want to be sure that if we intercept one of the sessions, even if you break into the session, you cannot access other sessions, or you cannot actually access anything. Because even if you break before authentication, you won't be granted access to destination server. Only after you authenticate, we will provide you a connection to the destination server, stuff like that. And the Capsicum makes it really clean and very efficient to actually implement this kind of security. That's something that we really...
You're not having to enumerate all the things you can't do. You're saying you're only allowed to do these things.
Yes, this is capability ideology. You only grant the exact rights or access to resources that the process requires, which is not Unix ideology. Because of course, if you're running Unix program, it has access to everything.
Sure. And does the audit framework stuff play into that as well, and Audit BSD?
Audit BSD does use Capsicum, but it's not related to our product. Audit BSD is a daemon to securely and reliably distribute audit trial files, because in FreeBSD we have audit framework which monitors, which can log every single system call that is called in the system. But the problem was, of course, the logs were stored locally. So if I break, I remove the log, and that's all.
Or modify it.
Exactly. And Audit BSD distributes the logs as quickly as possible using TLS, and it does use Capsicum also very heavily. So because we of course want to protect that someone won't be able to attack the box that is actually gathering the logs. So Audit BSD is using Capsicum Sandbox, so even if you break into the remote process on the remote machine, you won't be able to access logs we already stored. So that's very nice.
Very cool. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think no. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
It's a great conference again, and I invite everyone for another BSD Conference.
We'll find out at the end of the conference where the next one is.
It's funny. An extra question is it more enjoyable to attend the conference rather than run it?
Well, it's so relaxing for me because on most EuroBeacons I was a speaker.
Right.
So I organized one in Poland, of course, so that was...
even worse.
Yes, not anymore probably.
Right.
Not earlier than in 10 years. But not speaking at the conference and not organizing, it's very relaxing. I really enjoy it.
This is my first time not speaking, and it's like, oh, I have all this free time and there's no pressure.
I'm so jealous.
You're kind of lucky though. You're doing first. My very first conference was EuroBSDCon in Poland that Pawel hosted, and I was the very last talk on the very last day.
Yeah, it's just hanging.
There was a closing keynote after, and everybody was rushing around. Like, I'm trying to finish my talk.
But you had a lot of time to actually finish your slides. So
I did spend up until the last minute working on my slides.
And that's what I'm going to be doing tonight. Well, thank you so much for being with us on the show.
Okay, and we're back. Hope you guys enjoyed that interview. It was fantastic. A little crazy recording in the hallway there, but it seemed to work out well.
Sorry about the lighting.
Yeah, it's all good. It happens. You just deal with what you got when you're at a conference. So
you know what Pawel looks like now. So when you meet him in person, you'll know what he looks like. And the important thing was you could hear what he was saying, and that's all that matters.
Definitely. So before we close the show, of course, we want to mention our other sponsor this week, which is Tarsnap, and the URL, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Let them know that we sent you. But Tarsnap, of course, if you're not doing backups, you need to be doing backups. And if you're going to do them, you might as well do them encrypted so that you don't have to worry about what's happening on the remote end with your sensitive data, whether it's super sensitive or not. I mean, you still don't want people going through your data if you can help it.
Exactly. And having it encrypted that way is the only way you can be sure that nobody's tampered with it before you get it back.
That's right. So again, take a look at Tarsnap's site. It's all prepaid, so you can deposit money into an account and only pay for what you actually use. But definitely want to be doing backups. And of course, Tarsnap has clients for pretty much everything under the sun. And the best part is,
including sun.
Yes, including Sun, right? And if you're familiar with the command line and know how to use Tarsnap's going to be very similar. It's not got a steep learning curve or anything to go ahead and get set up.
Exactly.
So definitely want to take a look at that, and of course, let them know that we sent you. We would appreciate that. But of course, as we close the show, we do want to mention some of the usuals. All the tutorials will be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv. So go there. You can refer to old tutorials. A lot of those are just as good as the day we did them, and maybe even better if we've updated them since then. So
I think almost every tutorial has been updated once.
See? So that's perfect. And of course, if you have questions or comments or show ideas or topics or stories you want mentioned on the show, something you find that maybe we haven't seen yet, send it over to feedback@bsdnow.tv so we can get that, roll it into a future episode.
Are you having a user group meeting? Let us know. We'll mention it and get a bunch of people in your area to find out about it or bother to come out. Or,
Matter of fact, if you're a Linux, let's put this call out there. If you're a Linux user and you know of Linux users groups in your area, maybe mention it, and we'll put the call out saying if anybody's in this particular area who's a BSD expert and can go spare a couple hours and impart some wisdom and knowledge about BSD, we'll try and see if we can hook you up with somebody.
Yes. Yeah. So, we talked about last week the Phoenix users group having a BSD panel to explain to the Linux users what BSD is and how it works and why it's different. If you want to do the same thing but don't have a BSD expert in your Linux users group, let us know where you are and we will try to hook you up with one.
That would be fantastic. And of course, you can watch us record the show live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern or 1900 UTC. Of course,
watch out
the time change.
Time change is different in Europe than it is here, so it gets all kinds of screwy. It's 2 p.m. here always, so that'll be different for 2 weeks until we change, and then it'll be back, and it's a mess.
It's a little confusing, but
use Google Calendar or something to do the translation for you.
So, of course, we'll be back next week with a regular episode since we will both be back and rested from our MeetBSD experience.
It'll probably be slightly bigger than a regular episode because we'll have lots of conference stuff to unload on you guys.
Definitely.
We're going to make you so jealous you didn't come.
Well, hopefully you guys are coming out there. Exactly. So you won't have to be jealous. But for those who couldn't make it, we'll try and make the experience as realistic and live as possible. Which, speaking of, hopefully we were able to broadcast some of this live while we were out there. So hopefully you got a small taste of it before the next episode happens. But we still appreciate you being with us this week and hope you enjoyed the interview with Pawel, which, of course, was fantastic to do in person, live. And
yes, thank you so much to Pawel for doing that with us.
Definitely. So we look forward to hearing you guys next week and discussing all the latest BSD news again. So until then, guys, stay safe.